Hope you're being good for mums and dads and carers, and enjoying your Easter holidays. I hope it's nice and sunny when you're listening or watching this video. If it is, get outside and play. Anyway, so I'm going to read the next instalment of our book, My Friend Walter. So this is part 5. Couldn't you marry who you wanted to? I asked. Aye, so long as the Queen wanted it too, and she did not want it. I think she would not have minded if I had not loved Bess so well. But she knew I did, and that made her mad with me. She sent me to the Tower. Is that why they cut off your head? Because you married someone she didn't like? Walter laughed. Oh no, sweet cousin, no. But I was never again to be so high in esteem of my Queen, nor never again so high in the land. So why did she cut off your head? 'Twas not the Queen that destroyed me. His brow lowered as he went on. 'Twas the monstrous king that followed her, King James. He it was that had me tried for high treason and condemned as a traitor. Walter Raleigh a traitor! His eyes blazed. And 'twas this villainous king who robbed my family of all we had. He it was that took away my lands, and my farms and my estates, even the jewels from my fingers. Yet I blame myself as much as the king, for there was more pride in my head than wisdom, and right it was that it should be struck off, for I had grievously mismanaged my affairs through a mistaken belief in my own invincibility, a belief that led not to riches, but to the death of my son, my dear Wat. He was a rebellious boy and argued much, but I loved him none the less, and 'twas I who caused his death, and he turned his head away from me to wipe his eye. What do you mean? I asked. They let me out of the Tower only because I said I knew of a gold mine in Guinea that would fill the king's coffers. That's what the beefeater said in the Tower, I said, but he did not seem to hear me. I knew where the gold mine was, but by the time we reached Guinea, I was too ill to lead the expedition, so I sent Wat in my place, and the Spaniards were waiting for him in the forests. They were informed, I tell you, cousin, and by no less a person than the king himself. I know it to be so. They ambushed my men, and so came my son to his death, and our expedition to its failure, and my life to its miserable end on the scaffold. He shook his head and sighed deeply. Dear God, I can scarcely bear to think of it even now. So you see, cousin, where vain ambition leads, I should have stayed on the farm where I belonged. But look! He put his hand on my arm. A heron circled above us and came to land on the water's edge, not a stone's throw away. As he watched him stalking stiffly through the shadows, a kingfisher flashed past us and was gone again upstream. Oh, such wonders as these I had almost forgotten, he whispered, and the heron lifted off and lumbered into the air. And it was not only the wild creatures of the farm that he found such joy. He made a collection of many of the plants and herbs and flowers he found about the farm, though at the time I did not know why. In the warm summer evenings he would walk with me through the fields of humming clover, amongst the sheep and the cattle, and recall his own days as a boy on the farm. The fields were bigger now, he said, and there were fewer trees, and he could wish the river was clear again, and the meadows full with wild flowers, as they had once been. But that apart, it was much as he had remembered it. I showed him how I liked to follow butterflies, and he loved it as much as I did. We followed one red admiral for a whole afternoon once, before it joined up with a dozen others on a bank of nettles. After that we couldn't be sure which was ours, and we lost it. He was fascinated too by the farm machinery, the mower, the 4-furrow plough, the baler, the hay elevator, and the corn drill. He wanted me to explain the workings of each one, and I found that difficult, for although I loved driving the tractor, I had never much interested myself in how the farm machines actually worked. It was the tractor in particular that took his fancy. If I do nothing else remarkable in my life, it will be enough to claim that I, Bess Throckmorton, taught Sir Walter Raleigh to drive a tractor. Cars, he said, were but insects compared with the majesty of a tractor. One misty morning I drove the little Massey Ferguson 125, the only one Father would let me drive, to the little meadow below the wood where no one could see us, and Walter climbed up into the seat. I showed him what was what, and off he went, his laughter ringing above the chugging and spluttering of the engine. He made figures out of 8 through the long grass, and then rumbled away down towards the gate to the marsh field and the river beyond. I called for him to come back, for the horrible Bales might well have been fishing on the far bank, and to them, or to anyone else, the sight of a tractor driving itself along might be a little upsetting. Not that I minded upsetting the Bales, but there would have been bound to have been telephone calls and questions and difficult explanations. Anyway, Walter obediently turned and at full throttle bore down on me, his black cloak flying out behind him. It occurred to me for a moment he might forget what he was riding and where the brake was, and that it might be expecting the 125 to rear up on its hind legs and paw the air and whinny. He was riding it just like a horse, but he stopped in time and patted it on the chimney. It took all my persuasive powers to get him off, so that I could drive it back to the sheds. But in the end he rode up beside me on the step and laughed like a boy all the way home. We made hay until dark that evening, all of us there, Mother turning and Father baling, and Walter and me standing them up in castles of 4 in case of the rain. Gran kept bringing out the orange juice and the tea and the buns, and grumbled about the creaky knees. She could be an old misery sometimes, and Mother kept telling me not to lift the heavy ones. "It's bad for your back," she said. "They're lighter in the middle of the field. I'll manage the wet ones along the hedges." But of course she need not have worried, for I had all the help I needed that evening. Hay bales had never felt so light to me. You're working well, Bess," Father called out. "We'll make a farmer of you yet," and I glowed inside. I had a sudden longing to introduce him to my friend Walter. I wanted very much for them to like each other, but a secret is a secret, and I kept it. I was hot, and I was dusty, and I was tired, but at that moment I was as happy as a lark. Why is it, though, that the good times never seem to last for long? Will returned home later that night, and came and sat on my bed and talked about the miles they had tramped, the mountains they had climbed, the secret cigarettes he had smoked, and all about Peter Munns from school, who had fallen out of a tree and broken his leg, and how it served him right anyway. But to be fair to Will, it wasn't his homecoming that spoiled everything. To be honest, I was quite pleased to have him home again. He kept everyone happy, and he made everyone laugh. Even Father cheered up a bit. I don't like to admit it, but if truth be told, we need Will in our house. He's the glue that sticks us all together, if you know what I mean. "Did you go to the party with Auntie Ellie?" he asked, after he'd finished telling me about his camp. "Went to the Tower of London," I said. "See the crown jewels? Wicked, aren't they?" "I saw the bloody tower," I said, "where Sir Walter Raleigh lived. He's a distant relation to ours, you know." "Relation? Ancestor, then." "How do you know?" "Auntie Ellie said. So did Miss Soper." "Who's she?" "Cousin of Auntie Ellie's." "I done him in history." "Who?" "Walter Raleigh. When we did the Armada at school. He had his head chopped off, didn't he? Traitor, wasn't he?" "No, he wasn't." "Well, they cut off his head, didn't they? Must have done something wrong." "They shouldn't have done. He didn't do anything wrong." I might have said more than I meant to if the argument had had a chance to get going, but it didn't. There were sudden loud voices downstairs in the kitchen. We looked at each other, Will and I. We could hear Father banging the table and shouting. "What's up with them?" Will asked. "Arguing about Gran, are they?" It's true that Gran was the only thing they ever argued about, and that was rare enough. "I don't think so," I said. "Father's not been like himself. Something's wrong, I think, but I don't know what." I had a sudden tickle in my throat. It must have been something from the hay dust. I coughed twice. My blue elephant fell off the chest of drawers and landed at Will's feet. I spoke without thinking. "I don't mean it like that," I said. and then I clapped my hand to my mouth. Didn't mean what, like what? Will asked as he picked up the elephant. What are you on about? And he pulled the elephant's trunk and tied it into a knot like he always did. Nothing, I said, bouncing out of bed and snatching it out of his hand. Didn't mean nothing. But Will was canny, and he knew when I was lying. He always did. You're up to something, Bessie, he said, looking around him. What little mystery have you been hatching up in here while I've been away? Nothing. I don't know what you mean. Well, see, he said, and went towards the door. He stopped and sniffed the air. Smells of tobacco in here. You've been smoking, have you? I shook my head vigorously. He sniffed again. Funny, he said. And there's another thing. You've been down in my chemistry lab, haven't you? No. You sure? Of course I haven't. I hate your smelly chemistry lab. Anyway, I never go down the cellar. I'm frightened silly of the spiders. You know I am. He seemed to accept that. Oh, someone's been down there. That's all I know. Someone's been down there messing about. I know they have. Well, it wasn't me, I said, knowing quite well who it was. Who else could it have been? Will seemed satisfied with that, and he went out, leaving the door open. He always left my door open. I shut it and listened to be sure that he was gone. I coughed 4 times and nothing happened. Not at first. You there, Walter? I whispered, and he appeared just where I thought he was, sitting in my chair. He seemed to like my chair. It was you, wasn't it? You've been down in the chemistry lab, haven't you? Why? What for? He held up his hands and chuckled. I confess it freely, Chick, he said. I liked it when he called me Chick. You must excuse me, but I have a passion for knowledge of science, and for chemistry in particular. I was a man of science in my lifetime, and did many experiments with plants and herbs, and though I say it myself, I was not entirely unsuccessful. Science to me is like the world. There is much to explore, much to discover. One gains such a paltry slice of knowledge in just one's lifetime. He bowed his head. Your pardon, cousin. Henceforth I shall not indulge myself with greater caution. That much I promise. It's not going to be so easy now Will's back, I said, and you better stop smoking in the house. He's suspicious already. I know he is. If you say I must not, then I will not. He's cunning as a weasel. Eyes in the back of his head, I said. What's a weasel cannot see, a weasel cannot catch? Said Walter. Do not trouble yourself, sweet Bess. All will be well. But I knew my big brother Will a lot better than he did, and I wasn't quite so sure. And there we are. We are now on to chapter 4. So the next time I read, I will be reading chapter 4. It's very exciting. Might be good. And I will see you soon.